Hey everyone, this is Ryan Chen here of Loancater, and in minutes, I'm gonna rewire how you think about debt. What if I told you that debt has nothing to do with how much you borrow and everything to do with how you structure it? I have personally funded over 300 business loans. And the biggest thing I have learned is that most businesses are not struggling because they took on too much debt, but because they took on the wrong kind. And that one distinction is going to rewire the way you think about every dollar your business borrows. So if you have ever wondered why your bank said no, why your payment feels like they're choking on your business even though your revenue is solid, or how some business pays 7% on the same dollar amount that's costing you 40%, this is how. Debt is the instrument, and the way you structure that instrument determines whether it builds your business or it burns. So here's how to restructure your debt to make every dollar you borrow actually work for you. Now, every single business I sit down with business owners and review their files, they all fall into one of two camps. The first is the business owners who treat debt like it's radioactive. Revenue is growing, real opportunities are sitting right in front of them, and they will not touch a dollar of borrowed money because somewhere along the way, they decided all debt is dangerous. So they self-fund everything, they grow slower than they need to, and they watch competitors who are half as talented move twice as fast because these competitors had capital, they did not. The second camp is the complete opposite. They will sign anything that gets approved, term sheets come across the desk, they look at the funding amount, they check whether they can cover the month's payment, and they sign. No question on what the effective rate is, term length, or what the position does to your file 6 months down the line. And both of these business owners believe they are making the smart move. The first one thinks caution is discipline, while the second one thinks speed is aggression. But they are making the same exact mistake, which is reacting to debt instead of engineering it. Because when I look at the file that ended up in real trouble, it is almost never one giant bad decision that caused it. It is a chain. One emotional decision and about capital leads to the next, and then the next. And by the time that business owner is sitting across from me, the debt structure has quietly eroded underneath them while their revenue kept looking perfectly fine on the surface. And that's what makes it so dangerous. The P&L tells one story, the debt schedule tells a completely different one. And that gap between what the revenue looks like and what the debt is actually costing is where businesses go from stable to fragile without the owner even noticing it. So the way I want you to think about this from here forward is simple. Debt is an instrument, and the way you structure it determines everything. So now you understand why most business owners get this wrong, but what does that mistake actually cost in real dollars? Because if you do not understand the real math behind the debt you are carrying, you will continue overpaying on every dollar you borrow and never even see it. Now, most of the damage I see on this file starts with one product, and that's the merchant cash advance. An MCA at a factor rate of 1.35 on a 200,000 advance sounds manageable on the surface because you are getting 200, you are paying back 270, and that is 70,000 in fees. And when that person across the desk tells you that, it does not sound terrible for fast capital. But the cost is not in the fee. The real cost is in the term and the payment frequency. Because when you take that 270,000 and you spread it across 6 months repayment window of a daily payment pulling from your operating account, the effective APR when you analyze it lands somewhere north of 70%. And depending on the deal, it can go much higher than that. So you are looking at roughly $2,000 a day coming out of your bank account every single business day for 6 months. And the rate is only half the problem. The other half is what those daily ACH debits due to your operating account over 90 days. Because when you have $2,000 leaving your account every morning before you can use that for payroll, vendors, materials, and anything else your business needs to function, your ending balance drops. Your account starts swinging. Some days you are fine, some days you are scraping the bottom. And that volatility shows up on every single bank statement you produce from that point forward. Now, most business owners do not think about what their bank statement looks like to the next lender. But I do, because I review those statements every day. And when I see an operating account with daily ACH debits eating into the balance, negative days showing up 2 or 3 times a month, and an ending balance that purely holds, that tells me this business is stretched. And if I can see it, every other lender who touches that file can see it too. So the MCA is not just costing you $70,000 in fees, it's costing you other future doors that closes because your bank statements now tells a story that makes the next lender say no or charge you double. And that downstream cost is often more damaging than the interest itself, which is exactly why stacking happens. The first advance creates a cash flow hole. That hole makes the account look tight, and that tightness makes the second advance feels necessary because you need liquidity to keep running. And by the time someone has 2 or 3 positions stacked on top of each other, the combined daily EBITs are pulling more out of their account than the original amount they even needed in the first place. Now, with all of that said, there's a real place in the market for short-term capital. We fund short-term capital. I fund MCA myself at Loancater. That product exists because speed matters, and sometimes a business owner needs capital in 24 to 48 hours, and there's no other product that moves that fast. The problem is not that MCA exists. The problem is that most business owners end up using a short-term product as a long-term solution because nobody ever showed them what else was available. And so the real cost of capital is not just the interest rate on the term sheet. It is the interest plus the fees plus every downstream consequence that debt creates on your file and your cash flow for the next 12 months. When you add all of that up, the true number is almost always bigger than what you were told when you signed. So now you have seen what the wrong debt actually costs. But where most people make their next mistake is that they hear everything I just said and think the answer is to avoid debt entirely. And that is just wrong. Now, you probably heard the phrase good debt versus bad debt before. And usually that conversation is some surface level explanation about how a mortgage is good and a credit card is bad. But let's save that conversation for another day because there's an operator vision that one I can see play out on real files every single week where the exact same dollar amount produces completely different outcomes depending entirely on how it's structured. And the easiest way to see it is to put 500,000 in stacked merchant cash advance next to 500,000 in a DSCR loan because the monthly payment on MCAs might be 10, 12, 15 times higher than the DSCR loan. That total cost over the life of the debt is completely different. And what each one does to your ability to borrow in the future is night and day. The MCA destroys your DSCR and makes every future dollar of capital more expensive. The DSCR loan actually improves your file because the payments are low, the term is long, and the lender who pulls your statements actually sees stability instead of chaos. And the difference has nothing to do with the amount and everything to do with the structure because the same instrument can be good or bad depending on 4 things. What is it attached to, how long the term is, and how frequently you are making payments, and whether it improves or hurts your debt service coverage ratio over time. And that is why the best form of short-term capital is when you know exactly what it is for, you know exactly when you are paying it back, and you have a clear plan to graduate to cheaper capital once the immediate need is handled. You are solving a timing problem with a timing product, but that same product taking without an exit strategy or any thought about what it does to your file for the next year is a version that turns into a stack, and I see the other side of it just as often. I had a client come in ready to sign 7A, an SBA 7A. When we reviewed his file, line of credit actually made more sense for what he needed. Because the SBA would have taken 60 to 90 days to close, it would have come with guaranteed fees on top of the interest, and it requires key man insurance, which is another cost most people do not factor in. So the line of credit closed faster, the fees were lower, and because he could draw and repay as needed, it gave him flexibility the SBA would not have. And that is what separates good debt from bad debt at the operator level. It is not about avoiding risk. It is about matching the right product to the right need with the right terms and knowing what each decision does to your file downstream. And everything I just walked you through about good debt versus bad debt is how you should be thinking about it. But your lender sees a completely different file picture when they pull your file. Your file is telling your story right now. And for most of the business owners I work with, that story is the one that gets them declined, charged double what they should be paying, or locked out of the product that would actually fix their situation. And every month, that structure stays the same, the story gets worse. Now, the good news is there's a way to engineer your file so that the next time a lender pulls it, they see a business they actually want to lend to. And it starts with understanding exactly what they are looking at, what metric carries the most weight, and what patterns they need to see before they say yes. But real quick, before I do, if you want us to look at your specific numbers and tell you exactly what you qualify for, what the cheapest path to restructuring looks like, I will leave a link in the description below, and our team of experts will help you out. Now, when an underwriter opens your application, they are not looking at your revenue and making a good call. They are running your file through a specific set of metrics, and those metrics carries more weight than your credit score, your time in business, or how convincing you are in the room. The four that matters the most are your DSCR, your global cash flow, your credit utilization, your payment velocity. Now, DSCR is the most important one in that group, so I want to make sure you understand it completely. DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. All it measures is how much cash your business generates relative to how much you own in debt payments. Take your net operating income divided by your total annualized debt payments, and that number tells you, or tells the lender, one thing: can this business carry its obligations to operate? So if your business generates $300,000 a year in net operating income and your total annual debt payment comes to $200,000, you take $300,000 divided by 200,000, and that gives you a DSCR of 1.5. That means for every dollar of debt you own, your business is generating $1.50 in operating income. A lender looks at that and sees a business that can handle its payments and still function. Most lenders wants to see that ratio at 1.25 or more. If you are at 1.25, you are in the range where conventional lenders will work with you. But if you drop below 1.0, you are spending more on debt than your business generates, and no conventional lender is going to approve that file. And that is exactly why two businesses with the same revenue and credit score can walk into the same lender and get completely different results, because the one doing $2 million a year with clean bank statements and one well-structured long-term notes looks completely different from the one doing $2 million with 3 stack advances and any balance that dips near zero twice a month. The first one gets approved at 8% with a 10-year term, while the second gets declined, offers something at 35% over 12 months. And that only difference was the debt structure walking in, because it is not just about how much money you bring in. It is how your debt is structured, how many positions you carry, what your cash flow looks like over the last 3 to 6 months, and how stable your balance sheet holds under scrutiny. Your P&L and your balance sheets are a pitch deck to every lender who touches your file, and most business owners have never even looked at your own numbers through a lender's eye. Now, what bankable actually means from the inside is not just any single number. It is a pattern across your entire file that tells the underwriter this business can service its debt and still operate. Revenue is stable or growing, debt payments are manageable relative to income, the operating account is not volatile, and the overall trajectory says this business is getting stronger, not weaker. And that pattern is something you can engineer deliberately, one position at a time, if you know what you're looking for. Everything I just told you about what lender sees on your file all connects to one concept, and that is what separates the business owners paying $14,000 a month from one paying $4,000 a month on the exact same amount of capital. Now, the capital stack is the idea that your business should not have one type of debt sitting underneath it. It should have layered debt, with each layer serving a different purpose and making the other layer work better. Think of it like a building where the foundation has to be solid and stable. That's your first layer. Long-term fixed debt, things like commercial real estate loans, DSCR loans, SBA loans. They carry the lowest rate and the longest term. And this is the layer that anchors your entire file. It brings your DSCR up, keeps your monthly obligation low, tells every lender who pulls your statement that is the foundation underneath the business, and it's secured. If you skip this layer and your entire debt structure is sitting on short-term, high-cost obligation, the building is unstable from the ground up, and every lender can see it the moment they open your bank statements. The second layer is revolving credit for flexibility, and that is the layer that most business owners are completely missing. A business HELOC, for example, lets you draw capital when you need it and pay it back when you do not. You only pay interest on what you actually use. Whether it's a seasonal dip, an unexpected vendor cost, or payroll during a slow stretch, this layer handles all of that without you having to take on fixed debt every single time something new comes up. Now, the third layer is short-term working capital, and that is where MCA lives. They are perfectly fine in this position as long as they are sitting on top of the solid foundation and not acting as the foundation itself. A short-term advance that bridges a specific gap with a clear payoff date where you know where the revenue is coming from and you have a plan to transition to a cheaper capital afterwards is the right use of this layer. But the problem I see every week is business owners who have the third layer and nothing else underneath it. Just expensive short-term capital doing job all 3 layers at once. Now I'll give you a real example of what this looks like. I had a client come in short-term position stacks, daily debits, pulling from their account and monthly obligation high enough to keep the DSCR underwater. We restructured that same debt across 3 layers, put a long-term note at the bottom, set up a HELOC in the middle of the flexibility, and size the one short-term position that remained to be a specific bridge with a clear payoff date. After that, the monthly payment dropped, the total cost dropped, and the DSCR improved. Then the next time this business applies for capital, they qualify for products that were completely off the table 6 months earlier. And the reason this works is not because any single product in that stack is magic, but because each layer is doing what it's designed to do. The long-term debt keeps payment low and the ratio healthy. The revolving credit absorbs cash flow variability without adding fixed obligation, and the short-term capital handles timing problems without becoming permanent. I had another client who came in needing capital for a specific window before a contract payment kicked in, and he knew the exact date the revenue was hitting. So instead of taking on a 12-month loan that he did not need, we matched the debt to a timeline with a short-term product that would pay off the week his money came through. That way, he got the capital he needed, his monthly obligations stayed manageable, and when the payment hit, he cleared the position and walked away clean. That product matched the purpose, and that made all the difference. And that's capital stack engineering. Everything spins around building the right combination of product where each one supports the others. Your total monthly debt service comes down and your borrowing power goes up. Now the capital stack gives you the architecture, but the real danger is the next term sheet that lands on your desk, because one wrong signature can undo months of good structure, and I want to make sure you know exactly how to pressure test every single deal before you sign it. So before you take on any dollar of debt, we're gonna do 4 questions. The first one is simple. What is the true cost annualized? The effective annual cost when you account for the fees, the length of the terms, the payment frequency, and if you cannot answer that before you sign, you are not ready to sign yet. Then ask yourself what this debt is actually attached to, because there's a big difference between funding an asset that generates revenue, bridging a timing gap with a clear end date, and covering an operating shortfall with no defined resolution. And that answer tells you whether this is strategic capital or a patch. The third one is the one most business owners never even think about, and that is, does this help or hurt my DSCR? Because every position you take on either improves that ratio in the right direction or the wrong one. And once you start filtering every borrowing decision through that, you stop making choices that feel manageable today but quietly destroy your file over the next 6 to 12 months. And this last question might be the most expensive to get wrong. So ask yourself, is this the right product for this need? Because the long-term needed funding or short-term capital is the most expensive mistake in business finance, and the short-term need locked into a long-term note with prepayment penalties is almost as bad. So matching the product to the purpose is half the battle. Now, beyond those 4 questions, the single best thing you can do for your business is build your lending relationships before you need them. The worst time to look for capital is when you're on a crunch, because your file is stressed, your leverage is gone, and the only product that will say yes in 48 hours are the most expensive ones on the table. So the best time to establish a relationship, open a line of credit, and get pre-approved for a facility is when your file is clean, your cash flow is strong, and you do not actually need the money, because that is when lenders compete for your business instead of the other way around. And becoming bankable is the path, because every short-term high-cost position makes the next dollar of capital more expensive, and every well-structured long-term position does the opposite. Now I want you to zoom out for a second, try to think about where your business is 10 years from now. In one version, you keep making debt decisions reactively, where whatever gets approved fastest, whatever covers this month's gap. You spend that decade cycling through expensive short-term capital and never build the kind of file that opens the door to the products that actually move the needle. In the other version, you start engineering your debt from day one to day forward. You match products to purpose, and you build your capital stack layer by layer. And what happens over those 10 years is that every future dollars of capital gets cheaper. Every lender who pulls your file sees a business they want to work with, and the compound effect that is just a better interest rate. It is fundamentally different business, because debt is instrument, and now you know how to play it. All you have to do is get the details right. Be careful though, because the details are different for every single business. And getting it wrong, even something as small as refinancing the wrong position first, can set you back months and cost you thousands of dollars you do not need to spend. So if you want to make sure you're getting it right, I will leave a link in the description below where you can contact our team, and we will pull your numbers, tell you exactly what you qualify for, what your ratio would be, and exactly what your first move should be. Now, everything I just walked you through in this video will drastically help you build the right structure going forward. But there are also specific mistakes that will kill your future borrowing powers, like banking with the wrong institution, stacking inquiries from too many brokers, or letting your any balance dip negative 3 or more times a month. So I broke all of them down in this video right here.